Hello, I'm Virginia Eskin. Welcome to First Ladies of Music, a new series about women composers. This program is underwritten by a generous grant from Northeastern University in Boston. Today we're going to be learning about living women composers. We're going to lead off with Taafe Zwilich. She was born in 1939. She was born in Miami, Florida, studied at Florida State, and then eventually made her way up north to Juilliard. She was a very fine violinist. She was a member of the American Symphony under Leopold Stokowski, and she would regard her most important teachers as Elliott Carter and Roger Sessions. Ellen has written many large-scale works for orchestra, song cycles, a lot of chamber music, and many other works for theater and that sort of thing. Her Symphony No. 1 received the Pulitzer Prize, in fact, and that was back in 1983. This work was commissioned by the American Composers Orchestra and the National Endowment. And it's interesting that women now really have the same access to this kind of support. The symphony was premiered by the American Composers Orchestra in 1982. That was a year before she received the Pulitzer, at Alice Tully Hall, and the conductor was Gunther Schuller. She's received many commissions since then, and the only thing she doesn't like to be called is a woman composer. She says, "Can't I just be a composer?" Here is the last movement of that Pulitzer Prize-winning work, her first symphony, performed by the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra, conducted by John Nelson. just heard the last movement of the Ellen Taafe Zwilich First Symphony, performed by the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra. John Nelson was the conductor. Now we head out to Scotland, where our next living woman is Thea Musgrave. She was born in 1928. She started actually as a pre-med student and changed her course, worked with Nadia Boulanger, where she, quote, learned the importance of every bar, unquote. Her first major commission was by the BBC Scotland Orchestra. It was a work for chamber ensemble, narrator and chorus. She enjoys a really large and complete career at this point. She's fortunate to have almost all her works performed soon after they are written. And I think she also enjoys repeat performances because her works are accessible. We want you to hear a work from 1960 by Thea Musgrave entitled Monologue with pianist Rosemary Platt. You just heard Monologue by Thea Musgrave with pianist Rosemary Platt. Now our next woman composer is Judith Lang Zaimont, born in 1945. Judith was born down in Tennessee, raised in New York City, where she began piano studies with her music teacher mother. Judith studied piano at the Juilliard School with Rosina Levine eventually, and performed as a pianist throughout her teen years and continues to perform and record. She began to win national prizes for her compositions at the age of 12, and by her early 20s decided to focus on composition. Her work is performed throughout the world by major orchestras, choirs, and chamber groups. Currently, Judith Zaimont is a professor of music at the University of Minnesota. We've chosen the third movement of one of her chamber works called Zones. It's her second piano trio, and it carries the title Temperate Zone. It's performed by pianist Joanne Polk, violinist Peter Winograd, and cellist Peter Weyrich. You just heard the third movement from Judith Lang Zaimont's second piano trio entitled Temperate. It was performed by pianist Joanne Polk, violinist Peter Winograd, and the cellist was Peter Wyrick. Now we're going to look at the life of Augusta Reed Thomas, much younger woman, born in 1964, very much alive. She's currently the composer in residence with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. That's been since 1997. And it ends this year in 2006. She's produced a lot of large-scale works. Her style is very sophisticated, it is intellectual, but it is also filled with bold, energetic lyricism. Well, we're not going to share any of those large-scale symphonic works with you today on First Ladies, but what we're going to do is share a very interesting piano piece she wrote. It's called Whites. And the piece is supposed to describe the different shades of white. Here it is, Whites by Augusta Reed Thomas, played by Patricia Goodson. You just heard Whites, a piano piece describing the different shades of white, written by Augusta Reed Thomas, and it was played by Patricia Goodson. You're listening to First Ladies of Music. We'd love to hear from you. You can send your comments via email to ladies@wfmt.com. You're listening to the WFMT Radio Network. Welcome back to First Ladies of Music. Now, our next living woman composer is Ruth Lomon. She was born in 1930 in Canada and came down here to the United States in the early 1950s. She said that her interest in the American Southwest and Navajo traditions developed when she began visiting Los Alamos in New Mexico. That was back in the 1960s. Ruth is a friend of mine, and I had a nice chat with her last week and asked her what she was up to, and she said that she's currently associated with the Women's Center at Brandeis University. And the reason that she'd gone to Los Alamos was because her husband is a physicist, and she got to go along and decided there must be something here of interest for me, and sure enough there was. And we want you to hear a work from a suite that Ruth Lomon has composed called Ceremonial Masks. And she told me that this is about women and their changes that affect their lives, their thoughts about God, maybe the earth, times, tides, all the issues that women are very closely connected to. And Ruth Lomon is I think a wonderful composer to take on a kind of an abstract subject like this. The work you're going to hear is for piano. It's called Changing Women, and it's performed by Rosemary Platt. You just heard Changing Women. It was a work by Ruth Lomon, and it was performed by Rosemary Platt. That was a work that celebrates the Navajo culture, which is a very interesting subject for Ruth Lomon, and I think it's an interesting subject for music. Now, our next living woman composer is Barbara Kolb, born in 1939 in Hartford, Connecticut. It's interesting that her father didn't want her to be a professional musician, but she sort of won out, and she went to the Hart School of Music, which is near Hartford, and she played the clarinet and got a master's degree in composition. And she eventually had to work as a music copyist to support herself. Eventually, Barbara Kolb gets a scholarship to go to Tanglewood, and she studied with Gunther Schuller. She also won the important Prix de Rome and many other big prizes. And you'll recall that Lily Boulanger won that important Prix de Rome. So she's following in some interesting footsteps. Barbara Kolb has composed massive works. They're sort of like big slabs of sound, and they are performed by all the major orchestras. She's enjoyed considerable success and had a lot of important residencies, and that means that she gets invited to be at home with an orchestra or at a college. She's written music for orchestra, ensembles, and even computer-generated tape in some of her works. You're going to hear a piano piece by Barbara Kolb. It's called Quietly and with Cruel Reverberation. It's played by Loretta Goldberg. That was Quietly and with Cruel Reverberation by Barbara Kolb, played by Loretta Goldberg on piano. And we like that title. Now we move to Libby Larsen, born in 1950, and she is very, very active and gets many commissions. She also writes for large schema, orchestras, theater, chamber groups, voices. She was one of the founders of the Composers Forum in Minneapolis, designed to promote music by living American composers. And it's interesting, in a 1999 interview, she said, Quote, kids are still taught that Beethoven was the best composer who ever lived, and that all composers are men, and that certain instruments are only played by men. End of quote. She set herself up to kind of undo that kind of notion. You're going to hear the first movement of Libby Larsen's Concerto for Marimba and Orchestra. I love the fact that she wrote an important work for marimba. The soloist here is John Kinsey, performing with the Colorado Symphony Orchestra led by Marin Alsop. You just heard the first movement of Libby Larsen's Concerto for Marimba and Orchestra. The soloist was John Kinsey, performing with the Colorado Symphony Orchestra led by Maren Alsop. Well, let's listen to Libby Larsen's Symphony No. 4, her string symphony. Let's listen to the last movement, which has the title Ferocious Rhythm, played by the Scottish Chamber Orchestra. Joel Revson is the conductor. You've heard Joel Revson and the Scottish Chamber Orchestra in the last movement, Ferocious Rhythm of Libby Larsen's Symphony No. 4. First Ladies of Music with Virginia Eskin is produced by Carolyn Pollan for 98.7 WFMT and the WFMT Radio Network. Steve Robinson is the executive producer. The engineer is Mary Mazurek. Thanks to Alice Abraham, librarian at WGBH Radio in Boston. And special thanks to Boston's Northeastern University for their generous support. I'm Virginia Eskin, inviting you to join me again next time for First Ladies of Music. This is the WFMT Radio Network.